I'ma cut to the chase. Metabots might just be the most slept on gem of the early 2000s. Sure, we all know Pokemon and Digimon, they both ran the playground. But Metabots? Metabots! It was a scrappy underdog with customizable robots and surprisingly deep lore. And then, it vanished. But why did that happen? What happened to the franchise that gave us iconic robot duels, intense video game, and a theme song that was such a banger? Like, it had no right to go that hard for a Saturday morning cartoon, but it decided it wanted problems and it gave us a banger. Like, come on now.
Go get your friends.
And not only did it give us a banger, it gave us one of the coolest MCs you'll ever see on a Saturday morning cartoon. And before you ask, I'm not talking about Icky. Icky was cool, but he was not Medabots. Medabots had that dog in him. And more precisely, I mean, he had a metal bug, metal thing. Doesn't matter. Medabots was that guy. And by the end of this video, my glazing aside, you'll understand why I think Medabots is such a slept-on gem of the early 2000s, and what potentially went wrong, and if Medabots is quietly plotting a comeback. So, I'm Remy, and I just want to know, has anyone checked out on Medabots? If not, let's. But before we get into the fall, let's talk about the rise. Medabots didn't get its start as a cartoon. It was born as a video game in 1997 for the GBA in Japan called Medabots. Think Pokemon but with robots, in way more strategic depth than the original Red and Blue Pokemon games had. Players collected Medabots, swapping their parts and building teams to fight opponents. The game's success even led to a manga adaptation. There was a full-blown anime followed in 1999. It became a phenomenon in Japan, which led to the usual merch, toys, you know, the works. But what really set Medabots apart was the robot design. It wasn't your traditional Gundams or your traditional mechs. Medabots found its design inspiration from other elements outside of traditional mechanics from insects and animals. They also had personalities. For example, take Medabots. That dude talked the most noise in the series for a guy without a mouth.
Huh? Well, Medabots, why are you reading the funny pages?
Because your dad got the sports.
Okay, wise guy.
I don't know what's making the biggest stink here. You or your feet?
Why, what?
Medabots, would you be a dear and take out the garbage for me?
Yes, ma'am.
Medabots, I order you to put down that garbage.
I don't take orders from you.
And how did he convey this? With his eyes. For example, take Spider-Man. Every Spider-Man artist makes the eyes his focal point for expressions when he has the mask on. Because obviously you can't see Peter Parker's face, he has a mask on. So artists tend to use the eyes on the mask to show the expression he would have with the mask on. And if you haven't noticed, they even started doing it in the MCU. For another Metabots related example, think Rakusho. Rakusho didn't talk a lot, but what he did have was a personality through how he carried himself. The man had a cloak, and if you didn't notice, any character that has a cloak that doesn't need it is automatically cool in my books. And Rakusho was one of them ones. Not to mention, a samurai stag beetle robot, just really cool. And that's the kind of unique charm that gave it attention when it came over here to the West. So the year's 2001, we survived Y2K and all the other scary stuff the 90s people thought was gonna happen. We also got the first Xbox gaming console. We got Harry Potter, we got iTunes on the iPod, but none of that matters because in 2001, we got Metabots in the land of freedom, baby. Let's go. But it was with a little bit of a twist. Instead of just dubbing it like you normally do with anime from across the sea in the early 2000s, the team behind the dub decided to revamp it entirely. The anime was heavily localized, adding jokes and changing the tone to appeal to a more Western audience. And after these changes, it landed on Fox.
Kiss your butt goodbye!
What the heck was that?
The road battles on Fox Kids.
With shows airing with it like Digimon and Pokemon, so it was right up there with the powerhouse of Saturday morning cartoons. And the revamp was a success. Kids loved the battles, the quirky robots, and the underdog story of Icky and Medabots. So everything worked out. It worked out really well. Maybe a little bit too well, honestly. Also, just side note real fast, just a quick little tangent. So I need you to walk with me real fast. Take off your suspicion of disbelief, and I need you to really think about what those Metabots were. They were walking, talking guns and swords. And they were just giving them to kids to play with on the school ground like that was normal. Also, the robots could teleport. Like, they could summon the robots from wherever they were, and they would just appear for a battle. Like, who was funding this? This had to be like some super rich tech company that was funneling trillions of dollars into this children's game. I want to say card game, but it's not even a card game. At least Kaiba played the game. And Kaiba couldn't afford Metabots. Metabots make Kaiba look poor. Like, it's so crazy. Okay, thank you for coming on my tangent. I just wanted to get that off my chest real fast because it was just like, while doing research, it's like, how do they even think this is financially stable as a career path? And speaking of career paths, who was paying for the referee? That referee was the only consistent adult that had any interest in these kids using thinking, sentient guns and swords. And he was elite. I love the referee. That man had his job down tight, and I know he was doing it for the love of the game, but still, who was paying this man's bills? Okay, suspension of disbelief back on. Let's get back to the script now. While the show found its success, it also set the stage for future missteps, but more on that later. Let's actually talk about the show now, and not my rant, but the actual show. Okay, let's go to the show now. Season 1 introduces us to our main character, Iki Tenryu. This your average school kid who wanted a Medabot but couldn't afford one, because I'm assuming a Medabot bare minimum, probably at its lowest cost price, had to be at least around $40,000. Because, like, there's no way those things were cheap. I'm sorry. They're living, thinking, sentient robots. They had to at least been a minivan price. Not to mention maintenance. You gotta refill your bullets and missiles somewhere. Who's gonna pop? Like, there's so many questions I have but won't get answered, and I'm just nitpicking at this point. Anyway, Iki's out of luck, because thankfully his parents are responsible and will not buy this child a living, thinking weapon that's also probably around $60,000 to $80,000. But unfortunately, they did not know they gave birth to an MC, and the universe said he needed to have a Medabot, so he got a Medabot. Luckily, the Medabot was Medabi, and Medabi, as I said earlier, got that dog in him, and Iki got lucky with that one. So let's talk about the two leads of the shows. We have Iki, voiced by Samantha Reynolds, and Medabi was voiced by Joseph Motiki. And what made Iki and Medabi's relationship so interesting as leads of this show is, unlike most creature collector shows back in the early 2000s, this show could genuinely function with either of them being the leads or not. Comparatively, let's talk about Pokemon. Pokemon would not really work without Ash and Pikachu's dynamic to some extent. Obviously, the show would still be a success, but you need the mascot. Pikachu by himself could probably not carry the anime if I had to guess. Same with Digimon. As much as I love Digimon, the Digidestined definitely need the Digimon. The Digimon would not work as a show lead, is what I think personally. As much as I love Agumon, I don't know if he has enough carrying power / personality to be a show lead and run a show by himself. As much as you like to say you want the Agumon show, could you really spend 24 minutes watching a guy say, Pepper Breath and Agumon warp Digivolve? And it's like, that's cool, but like, it's not really fun to watch for more than like 15 minutes maybe. And that's why I think Medabi and Iki were such a great dynamic for the show. And that's why I think seeing them go back and forth and being friends, haters, best friends, all that other fun human levels of dynamic was such an interesting thing.
Medabi's medal must be defective. You ask if I'm happy with him? Well, I'd have to say no.
Traitor! Wait till I get out of this net!
Then again, Medabi is all I have right now. Please release him. I need him. I need his help. I really can't do this without you, Medabi. Please.
And that's why I think it resonated with so many people in the early 2000s. They may not have known it back then as children, but they probably saw a little something different from just Pikachu used Thunderbolt. And Pikachu, I know how you're feeling, even if you can't say it, because you said Pika Pika with a different inflection this time. Yes, me understand you said human boy Ash. Thank you, Pika Pika. You see how that kind of would get tired really fast? And I feel like on certain levels, we all kind of understood that. And that's why Medabots stood out to us. And don't get me wrong, I'm so glad my boy Ash finally got his championship thing and he got to retire. He earned it. He's been putting in days over 10 years. That boy Ash has been 10 years for 20 years making it work. Respect to my boy Ash. But Medabi was different. Iki was different. And that's why I think the show resonated with so many people, even when we were kids. The show was animated by B-Train. They were responsible for animating the first 2 seasons of the Medabots anime, while Production IG animated the sequel series Medabots Spirits. A lot of people don't know about that one actually. Personally, if I didn't know any better, I would have thought this was animated by Studio Trigger. They have a similar art style, which is really interesting to see. So let's summarize season 1 real fast. After Iggy gets Medabi from Henry, a series of hijinks happens. They beat some bad guys, they do some cool things. Tournament happens here and there, blah, 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 blah. A secret plot involving the medals happens, and Henry shows up in a mask and beats up people. It's interesting. Think Yu-Gi-Oh! Levels of drama with robots instead of children's card games. Think of children playing with guns. Man, this is just like, I gotta stop thinking about the logistics of this and just have fun. Just have fun. Remy, stop thinking too hard. Okay, The show mixed humor, heart, and action, keeping kids glued to their screens every Saturday morning. It was everything we wanted as kids: adventure, comedy, and robots blowing each other up. Super fun time. I also have season 1 and season 2 on DVD. Like, I own the physical copy, so it's like I was a big fan of the show. If you somehow couldn't tell by now, I don't know how you wouldn't. As for season 2, they doubled down on the stakes. The road battles got bigger, the plot got darker, even the characters even grew. We also saw the Robo Rubber Gang and the villainous team that somehow was less threatening and hilarious, like a worse Team Rocket, but less heart, I guess. Well, maybe more heart, depends on who you ask. And by the end of the season, things were kind of ramping up a lot. The show had shifted. It was clear Medabots wasn't a show for laughs to some extent anymore. It was aiming for something a bit more dramatic. And then it just disappeared. Except it didn't. We just never got it over here, unfortunately. There's one more season, the prodigal stepchild, so to speak, the odd one out, Medabots Spirits. This wasn't a sequel series, it was a time show special, and the animation, also slightly different. It wasn't anything crazy different, but the visual expressiveness that the characters and the robots had definitely had been lost with the move to the new studio. Things were a bit more rigid and hard-edged, and had thicker outlines compared to the previous animation/art style. It was like your favorite band tries a new sound. It works sometimes, but it's not for everyone. Shout out Linkin Park and I guess RIP Chester. Despite mixed reactions, Medabots hit its peak around the early 2000s. They had the TV on lock, the toys were selling like crazy, and video games were dominating handheld consoles. At this point, it really felt like Medabots was a legit rival to Pokemon and Digimon. But the peak didn't last, unfortunately. Why? Keep watching, we'll get there. For right now though, I want to go back to talking about the robot designs. What made Medabots truly unforgettable were the robots. They weren't just tools for battles, they had personality. Metabee wasn't just Iggy's partner, he was his character in his own right. The design pulled from everything: samurais, animals, mythology, and the one who came up with such an incredible idea was the OG series creator, Ren Homura. While currently, to my knowledge, he isn't doing the designs anymore, the current series designer is Tayuga. Once again, I will put the names on screen because I am garbage at any language that isn't English, apparently. My one weakness, I guess. Whatever. Here you go. Name on screen. An interesting thing about them is that they've been a fan of the franchise since they were in elementary school, and now they get to be the lead designer for the games, which is such a cool thing to see happen to a person. New or old, every Metabot felt like a unique and memorable design. This level of creativity gave the franchise its identity, but also made you wonder, how much cooler could I make my Metabot if I mix this part with this part, this headpiece with this leg piece, this arm, this, that, and the third. And these designs led to these kind of creative decisions which you wouldn't find in other franchises, which is why Medabots was so cool. And as I just mentioned earlier, the franchise's roots lie with the creator Ren Homura's vision. He seemingly wanted a series that combined childhood nostalgia with futuristic innovation. The mix of strategic gameplay, collectible toys, and anime storytelling wasn't by accident. It was seemingly calculated brilliance, and for a while, it worked like a charm. And speaking of the toys, let's get into that now. In the early 2000s, if you didn't have a toy line to go with your show, you were doing something wrong, and probably you didn't have a show. And Medabots was no different. Released globally by Hasbro in 2002, Medabots had some of the coolest hands-on toys, in my opinion, of the early 2000s. They weren't just action figures, they were fully customizable, just like how the Medabots were in the show. You want Metabee's horns but on Rokusho's blade arm? You got it, put them together, no problem. The toys encouraged creativity and gave the fans the chance to recreate their favorite road battles or just make up their own. The designs were faithful to the anime down to the tiniest bolts and screws. And for those who love the challenge, which I don't know why you would as a kid, but there were model kits that required assembly, so making it a hobbyist's dream. Like, so if you're an adult now, maybe go look that up, maybe on eBay or something, I don't know. Treat yourself. There are even some special edition collectible Metabots out there. I believe there was a special chrome Metabee that was released as part of like a premium collection back in the day. So they just had everything locked down when it came to the toys of Metabots. Well, until they didn't, unfortunately. Sadly, the franchise itself, the toys, faded from the shelves and interest definitely waned. But if you were lucky enough to have one as a kid, you probably remember them as some of the coolest robot toys ever made. And nowadays, with 3D printing being such a huge thing, you could definitely make your own. And I don't know why Bandai couldn't just pump out more with Hasbro. Please, like, let me scratch this itch. Let me buy a Metabee toy, bro. I really kind of need one. Please, thank you, Hasbro, Bandai, please. And if using your imagination with the toys wasn't enough, there was actual video games too. If you really wanted to see your bots bash and fight, Metabots had you covered like they always do. As for the video games, they were kind of the franchise's backbone. The original Medarot games on the GBA were huge in Japan. Titles like Medabots AX were a huge hit in the West. Just once again, never look at Metacritic, dog. Metacritic will take the joy from your life. While Metacritic may not look favorably on Medabots AX, I believe it is a 10 out of 10 game because it is the perfect long car ride game and you have nothing to do. Just make sure you turn the volume down because as you all know, parents cannot drive and hear things at the same time. It's just how it works. Son, I can't see the turn off because your volume's too loud. I can't see and drive. You're distracting me. He's like, all right, man, you got it. I'll turn it down. I don't want no problems back here in the backseat. And if you thought it stopped at AX, the fun part is they never stopped making games in Japan. They even have a mobile game called Medabots S currently, and it's going strong. While it is unfortunately a gacha game, it's kept the customizable spirits of Medabots alive, so that's something at least. And the game is pretty popular over there. It's done crossovers with Digimon, Mega Man Battle Network, and even Zoids, surprisingly. Anybody remember Zoids? that might be a video in the future. We'll get back to that. So why hasn't this game come to the West? Well, your guess is as good as mine. While doing research, the most common answer I'm finding is that the powers that be are quote-unquote looking for the right time, saying it's currently not the right time. And I don't like that answer, to be honest, but nothing I can do. I'm just a small YouTuber, right? So why did Medabots fade in the West anyway? Personally, I think it was a combination of oversaturation, the competition being a bit too fierce, and a failure to adapt. Like honestly, coming out the same time as Pokemon was almost a death sentence for anything at that time period. It's just rough. Pokemon was just an unstoppable juggernaut, still is. It was just one of those situations like when you see an avalanche coming at you, what do? Do you try to run from it? Like you can't run from an avalanche. You're just not gonna realistically do that. And that's what Medabots did. It just couldn't run from the avalanche of Pikachu. And as for the games, like I just mentioned, they stopped coming to the West, unfortunately, cutting off a whole fan base and just potential revenue. Obviously, they probably thought it wouldn't be worth the effort of translating it and all the other stuff, but still, they just cut off that market entirely. And while doing research, I've seen clamorings about revival series or new video games and this, that, and the third about the series coming back to the West. And while that's a bit optimistic and obviously I would love it, I think at most people just kind of want to see if they get the mobile game first. Like let's start small, then eventually hope for an animated series. But realistically, if we couldn't get the mobile game, the odds of us getting a whole new animated series or anything else is very slim pickings. Still, even without the fancy video games and toys, the series still left its mark. It inspired countless fans and influences that could be felt throughout other mediums. Medabots was a product of its time, but its ideas, the customization, the strategy, and the humor still resonate today. So here's the big question. Could Medabots rise again? With the success of nostalgia and reboots, anything's possible. Like honestly, it's not too crazy to think that they would reboot the anime with a 2025 coat of paint. It's not impossible. Shaman King got a remake. A bunch of older 90s animes have been getting remakes for the last couple years. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. And as long as the mobile game keeps going in Japan, there's literally hope for it to happen. If nothing else, Medabots proves that even a scrappy underdog could shine bright, and honestly, it deserves another shot. So thank you for watching if you got this far in the video. Like and subscribe and all the other fun stuff, and I will see you in the next one, because we got a battle, Robo Battle. I'm singing the theme song now. I don't know. It's just a really good theme song, dog. Like, come on. Da-da-da-da, and we're gonna make it to the top. More power. Well, anyway, all right, bye, y'all.